Here's something that whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, we all have in common. We all want to win with money, don't we? I've never met anybody who is excited to live under financial pressure. We all want to win with money, and we all want a little more money at the same time. When's the last time you saw somebody turn down a raise? I mean, that's pretty rare, isn't it? And I don't think this desire to win with money is wrong. Unfortunately, I just don't think we're very good at it. Welcome to Journey at Home. I am Matt, and if it's your first time tuning in, thank you so much. We're creating content to make it simple for you to follow Jesus and live a better life. So hit that subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications, and let's get started. Even though we are one of the wealthiest nations in the world, most Americans spend more than they make. In other words, we make $1 and we spend $1.25 or $1.50. That's not rational, it's not very smart, but that's what we do. Most Americans pay interest on things that decrease in value. We go buy an item that we don't have the cash to purchase, so we borrow the money at interest, which means if the item costs $100, we're not actually paying $100 for it. Meanwhile, the moment that item entered our possession, its value is beginning to decrease rapidly. So with interest, maybe we paid $120 for an item that's now worth $50. Again, that's not very smart, but it's normal. Here's one more example. Most Americans feel financial pressure to provide and acquire more than they currently have. Now, if you have ever been to a third world country, you know that most people in this world would look at your financial situation or mine, and they would wonder, what in the world are they stressed about? Because from their point of view, well, you're rich. I mean, they'd love to trade places with you. They couldn't possibly understand why you'd feel the need to save more money, borrow more money, invest more money, or buy more things. But come on, we know here in America, we feel the pressure. We feel the need to have more and get more and make more. Why is that? Why do 90% of Americans say that money is creating stress for them? How can we have so much but feel like we've got so little? Well, this is the second episode in our series Money Monsters, where we're not just talking about what to do with money, we are talking about what money is doing to us, because money has a sneaky impact on us both personally, relationally, and spiritually. So in this series, we're identifying 4 different money monsters, and they are all interrelated and interconnected. They're related to each other, they work together, and the end result is they tend to sabotage our lives and our relationships. So we're discovering how to beat them. Now, last week we talked about the first 2, an appetite for more and pride. Today, in this episode, we're going to talk about the third one, which is much harder to spot. This one knows how to camouflage itself in a lot of different ways. So you're going to need to look really closely to find it. But if you miss it, I'm just telling you, it'll do significant damage to the relationships you have with the people that you care about most. So let me set it up for us. One day, Jesus is teaching this large crowd of people when a really awkward, uncomfortable situation unfolded in the crowd. There are 2 brothers who saw each other in the crowd, and they got into an argument. Apparently, their father had recently died, and they are fighting over the inheritance. So one of the brothers interrupts Jesus, publicly as he's teaching, and he asks Jesus, hey, would you tell my brother to do the right thing because I want to get my fair share of the pie? But Jesus doesn't respond the way that he hoped. Instead of siding with one of the brothers, Jesus uses the argument between them as an illustration. He turns to the crowd and he says, hey, y'all see what's going on here? This guy thinks his brother's being unfair, but this isn't actually a fairness problem. Let me tell you what the real problem is. And here's what Jesus said. He said, I want you to watch out and be on your guard against, now what would you think he would say? Unfairness, family conflict, money? No. Those aren't the issues. He says, I want you to watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Greed? Yeah. According to Jesus, this is a greed problem. You know what greed is? Greed is the assumption that everything that's placed in my hands is all for my consumption. That's all greed is. In other words, whatever I get is for me, and I ought to hold on to it with closed fist. Now, this monster is incredibly destructive to the human heart because greed doesn't just create financial problems, does it? It creates relational ones. Greed causes you to value possessions more than people, causes you to neglect your family because you're always at work, causes you to try and control people with your money, causes you to live with no margin. Greed's often why you end up in debt. Greed will destroy a heart, damage a life, damage a family, damage friendships, destroy futures. And according to Jesus, it is built on a faulty assumption. It's just built on a wrong point of view or perspective of life. So Jesus goes on to look at these guys and he says, life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Now we all know this. None of us have life equals stuff as a screen reminder on our phones. But knowing it intellectually has not translated into living by it practically. I mean, if we're honest, the way we live indicates we do kind of think life equals stuff and life equals the money we have. If we didn't believe that, we wouldn't spend more than we make. We wouldn't pay interest on things that decrease in value. We wouldn't hoard what we have. That's greed. The monster's sneaky. And Jesus is about to show us just how sneaky it is. So what he does next is he launches into one of his famous parables, his fictional stories designed to make a point. He looks at the crowd that day and at these two brothers and he says, well, the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. Now it sounds like he's describing a typical middle-class American, doesn't it? It's like, here's a guy who finds himself with more than he needs. Things are going well, there's money left over at the end of the month, and he's asking himself, what am I going to do with all this extra? What do we do? I mean, you have enough, you don't have to work 7 days a week, so do I. You aren't wondering if you're going to have enough for your very next meal, me either. You got some money in the bank, you got some money invested. What do you do when you have a little extra? Now remember, Jesus is making up this story, so he could have had this guy do anything he wanted, but what Jesus says the guy does sounds really familiar to all of us. Jesus says, this rich guy thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Now just put yourself in his shoes. What do you do when you wake up on Saturday morning with nowhere to be? You got some money in the bank, you got some gas in the tank. What do you do maybe when the boss tells you, hey, you're getting a promotion with a really nice pay raise and you didn't even know it was coming? What do you do when you open up your online account and you find you got an unexpected tax refund? What's your first thought? You start thinking about things to upgrade. You want to go buy something new? Do you think, oh, I got to invest that, put it in savings? I mean, it's the kind of problem we'd all love to sign up for, right? To have so much extra that you don't have room for it all. To have so much stuff that you need a bigger house or another storage building. That is the situation this farmer is in. So he comes up with a plan. Jesus says, he goes, well, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns. I'm going to build bigger ones, and there I'll store my surplus grain. And then I can say to myself, oh, you got plenty of grain laid up for many years, so just take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Let's be honest. Sounds like a really responsible decision. This guy doesn't go buy a new car. He doesn't upgrade the house. He doesn't get a new tractor. He just tears down his barns and he builds bigger ones so that he can save everything that he has. And the best part from a business standpoint is he's even going to get a tax write-off for doing it. What makes this story so interesting to me is how relatable it is. He does exactly what sounds to us like the wise thing to do. I mean, let's be honest. This might be the very advice that we would give someone if they were in this situation today. All we need is for Jesus at this point to go, and he lived happily ever after. But that is not what Jesus says. Jesus says, but God. Well, yeah, we hadn't talked about him at all, right? We've forgotten about him because this farmer's feeling pretty self-sufficient. He didn't even consider God. Jesus says, but God said to the farmer, you fool. Wait a minute, I thought he was being wise. No, you fool. This very night your life's going to be demanded from you. And then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? And then Jesus ends the story by saying, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. Now, what is Jesus trying to teach us? Well, whenever we have more than we need, our assumption is always it's for our own consumption. But Jesus' point is that is actually an unhealthy mindset. It is a short-sighted mindset. Now, Jesus isn't being critical of the rich man because he planned for the future. He's actually being critical because he didn't plan far enough into the future. He assumed that everything he had ought to be saved and used for his own benefit, for his own pleasure, when in actuality he was going to lose it all eventually. I mean, at some point everybody leaves everything they have behind, right? So Jesus says, hey, how about you use what you have, at least some of it, to help somebody? And if you do, instead of leaving it all behind when you die, you've sent it on ahead. How do you do that? Well, every time you have extra, you just hold it with open hands. And you say, okay, God, this is yours, not mine. So what do you want me to do with this? I'm not going to assume it's all for my own consumption. And then you give first, you save second, and you live on the rest. Because I'm telling you, generosity, Jesus taught this, generosity is the only antidote to greed. It is the only medicine that can break the spell of greed on the human heart. But if we're honest, we all resist generosity, don't we? It makes us uncomfortable, which is a telltale sign that we're greedy. We just don't see it, but it's lurking in our hearts. Just think about it. We spend all of our time thinking about how to get more and more and more, and then somebody comes along every now and then and says, hey, here's a cause or here's a need, will you give? And what's our first reaction? Oh, I don't have enough. Now, we just spent an hour the other day figuring out how big of a monthly car payment we could carry, but we couldn't possibly give that amount instead. I mean, I'd rather be in debt and use my money for a payment than give it away to somebody. We just spent time figuring out how much bigger our retirement fund will be if we invest this much more, but we couldn't possibly give that much more. I'd rather save more than I actually need, save more than I'm going to be able to spend at the end of my life than to give some of it. I mean, we just spend a bunch of money buying stuff we don't really need and upgrading things that work perfectly fine, but no, I can't give more. It's irrational, isn't it? But my point is, that's what greed does to me, and it's what it does to you. It disguises itself and fools us into living as if life equals what we have. But one day, if you know that you're in the last days of your life, well, what's going to matter to you then? Is it going to be all the stuff you bought? Will it be the lives you changed and the people you love? Will it be how much money's still in your retirement account that you're not going to have a chance to spend? Or how many lives you impacted by what you gave away? See, when you get to that point, it'll be clear. Your view of the world, your perspective on life will be obvious, but unfortunately, most of us don't gain that clarity until it's too late, until we have lost the opportunity to act and live wisely with our money. So making the assumption that everything's for your consumption, it's actually a really dangerous way to live. Without realizing it, you are inviting greed into your heart and your life and your relationships. And greed is a terrible monster that eats alive everything that matters most to us. So, I want to invite you to take one simple step. When you get a little extra, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe next month, when you get a little extra, will you hold it with open hands and say, God, okay, I'm going to assume this is yours, not mine. So what do you want me to do with it? Will you just not assume it's all for your own consumption? Will you be open to using generosity, to developing a habit of generosity that will slay the monster of greed in your heart? Because one day, you're going to step from this side of eternity onto that side of eternity. And according to Jesus, you'll either be rich towards God when you do, or you'll be poor towards God, based on what you did with what God gave you.